This is a review of Britz high top, hired out of Perth for 3 weeks to tour south to Augusta and then east to Esperance, returning back to Perth 3 weeks later. It's meant to be a reality check on the carefully selected reviews that Britz put forward and the image they portray on their website. It's also meant to be fair and accurate. If you're watching this, then you're probably doing your research ahead of going on a holiday. You've probably been through TripAdvisor, you've probably read various posts on various forums, and you're probably wondering if there's anyone that you should hire from, because everyone seems to have terrible reviews, or, you know, it's either people who are extremely happy or they're really angry with their hired vehicle. So this is to try and tidy that up. There's 6 videos making up this full review. The first one you're watching now, this is the introduction and pre-sales. The next video up is about the exterior of the van, a look around that. The third video is an interior look at the cabin area, so the driving area of the van and the equipment available in there. The fourth is still the interior, but the living quarters, so the rear of the van where you're going to be sleeping and cooking, etc. The fifth video up is living equipment, so what Britz give you to make your stay a little bit more enjoyable or easier. And the overall conclusion is the last part, video 6 in the series. If you can't be bothered to watch all the videos, I would say the most important ones are the video 5, the review of the living equipment, because that's where things start going quite badly wrong for Britz, and 6, my overall conclusions and thoughts. If you're only going to watch 2, those are the 2 to watch. Now, one of the reasons I went with Britz is because they were the only company that would combine this hire with a second one out of Melbourne a week after we returned this one to Perth. And that meant we could get an extended duration discount combining both hires together, which totaled out at 87 days at $70 a day, plus the insurance, which we'll come to later. Now, Britz marketing would leave you to believe that they're offering a superior product relative to the backpacker market, and by backpacker I mean the same van offered by Travellers Autobahn or Campervan. In fact, the vans offered by those companies are generally old Britz or Apollo campervans deemed too worn to be accepted by Britz customers. Interestingly though, neither Travellers Autobahn or Campervan were able to better the daily rate I negotiated with Britz. And if you're hiring for an extended period, it's always worth negotiating and playing one off against the other. I was surprised that the backpacker options weren't more competitive. I imagine this is because, well, they don't need to be. They tend to get business as a result of offering more backpacker friendly terms on the insurance bonds. Essentially, if you want to hire this van, you either need to put down a $7,500 deposit or pay a liability waiver fee, which is an additional daily charge to a maximum of 50 days. If your hire is longer than that, then there are no further charges, which is just as well, because it can really bump up your total price. Now, Britz claim their high top fleet is dated between 2012 and 2016. The first van they tried to give me was a 2012 vehicle, and I rejected that because it was literally held together with duct tape and nails. It hadn't been properly cleaned. It was, to be honest, an embarrassment. I'm quite shocked actually that Britz thought it would be okay to give to a customer, given the image they portray, their market position, etc. It was honestly, no exaggeration, below backpacker standards. Now, after quite some faffing around at the Perth branch, they provided me with this one, which is again a 2012 registered vehicle. At this point, the cynic in me is already wondering just what proportion of their fleet is actually newer than 2012. Overall, I would say this vehicle is acceptable. I was disappointed not to have something a bit newer, but being the cynic, I took the salesperson's claim that the vehicles are no older than 2012 to mean they're almost entirely 2012. It has some wear and tear to it, but overall it's a level up on vans I've hired from Travellers Autobarn in the past. To be honest, the problems with the Britz don't really relate to the van itself. More, they are concerned with the quality and selection of the living equipment. I can't help but feel that the people in charge at Britz don't actually go camping in their own vans. It would be fair to compare this van with Apollo's high top camper and Around Australia's Motorhome's high top, and depending on the price you can get, possibly comparable with Travellers Autobarn's Cougar and Camperman's Juliet 3 high top. Though if you're going to compare it with the latter two, you need to make sure you're getting a markedly better daily rate, because those vans tend to be 6 years older. Now I'll talk about the pre-sales as part of the review. So I researched and paid for this van from the UK, did this via email with a Britz salesperson. I found the person to be knowledgeable and they were responsive. Most importantly, they were prepared to negotiate on the price, whereas the likes of Apollo and Around Australia Motorhomes refused point blank. Now that immediately turns me off a company. So based on 87 days total hire, I was able to get a daily rate of $70, but on top of that I had to pay the liability waiver. This was for two separate hires, one Perth to Perth and one Melbourne to Cairns. We did essentially, I think, nearly 3 weeks around Perth, and then the remainder of the time was Melbourne to Cairns. I was able to get free camping chairs and a camping table. I was able to get the one-way fee removed on the Melbourne Cairns, and I was also able to negotiate out credit card fees, and that was just by asking. I'm not sure if that was due to, or the reason I found it so easy was due to the fact that it was such a long hire, but it's definitely worth asking, I would say, regardless of how long. Certainly if you've got quotes from other places, you know, you can use those as leverage. Everything was fine. I was really pleased. I was really optimistic based on the pre-sales. And then we got to Perth, and it was when we picked up the vehicle, the problem started. So a few extras had been added to the bill by the branch that morning, notably rollover cover in case you roll the van, LPG and gas refills. The girl, well, when I questioned this, the girl handing over the vehicle initially insisted that I had asked for these things during my pre-sales negotiations. Now I knew very well I hadn't, and when I showed her the emails confirming that no such conversation had taken place and that I had nothing else to pay, because she was trying to get more money out of me, she was insisting that I owed them money. I showed her the emails, and she said that there was an error and the emails were incorrect, and even then, even with the emails, she still wanted money out of me. In the end, I made her call her head office, and they advised her that, yeah, I hadn't asked for them, and actually they had been added by the Perth branch that morning prior to my arrival without consultation. So she then claimed to have been in that branch for a few days, and and they didn't do it elsewhere. But in any event, it suggests very much that the Perth branch don't see any problem with doing that. So make sure you understand what you owe and what you don't owe before you pick up, because they will probably try this trick with you too. I believe the branches are targeted on those add-on sales. I personally find that sort of thing really irritating. I think at best it's underhanded, at worst it's a willful scam to try and get money out of the unsuspecting. So you've been warned. Be aware of it, and stick to your guns if they try and try it on with you too. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I actually refused the first van they tried to give us because upon opening the sliding door, the first thing you saw was rusty nails and gaffer tape holding the work surface together. I mean, I just don't know what the people at Britz think. Can you imagine, going to a hotel, opening the door, and the first thing you see is the wardrobe, falling apart and held together with gaffer tape and, nails or something? It's just mind-boggling that they would do that. In my opinion, there's no reason why standards in a camper van, and let's be honest, it's not the cheapest camper van, should be any less than a reasonable hotel room. And sadly, the Britz, that particular van was just a joke, and it shouldn't have been. It wasn't in horrible condition, not at the rates they're charging. So yeah, I wasn't impressed with that. If I had wanted that sort of standard, I would have gone with one of the backpacker operations. But the point of going with Britz was I thought, and I was led to believe, I would be getting something markedly better. Sadly, I was disappointed with that. Also, on that particular van, it hadn't been cleaned properly. There was sticky stuff down the doors. The trim was falling off. It was just, laughable, really. On top of that, it took them 2 hours to sort out an alternative. They had no contingency, nothing in case, something doesn't start or there's a problem or something. Absolutely nothing. We had to wait for them to completely prepare and ready a new vehicle from scratch. It took them over 2 hours. Pre-sales at the Perth branch, absolute joke. Anyway, they did eventually sort us out with a newer van, and that'll be in the next video, where we have a look at the outside and talk about that. So yeah, click through to the next video and we'll get started on that one.